What started as a simple request for warmth would turn into the deadliest night of his life. The New Mexico badlands stretched endless and unforgiving under a moonless sky. Stars scattered like broken glass across black velvet as Marshal Dixon Hartley secured the rope lines of his weather-beaten camp. He'd been tracking a band of train robbers for 6 days straight, following their trail deep into Mescalero territory. And now the November cold gnawed at his bones with teeth sharper than any wolf's. The mesquite fire he'd built threw dancing shadows across the red canyon walls, but the silence surrounding him felt wrong tonight. Too thick, too watchful, like the desert itself was holding its breath. Dixon was a lawman who'd learned to read danger in the wind, and every nerve in his body screamed that something was approaching. He reached for his tin coffee cup, his fingers brushing the Colt 45 on his hip, purely from instinct. When movement at the edge of the firelight made him go statue still. But here's what Dixon didn't know yet. The woman emerging from the darkness would change everything he thought he understood about trust. Out of the shadows, a figure appeared like a ghost born from the canyon itself. A young Mescalero woman, her long black hair dripping wet and plastered against her shoulders, her fringed deerskin dress clinging to her body as if she'd just crossed the nearby Rio Grande. Water droplets caught the firelight on her bronze skin, and her piercing obsidian eyes locked onto his with an intensity that burned with secrets she had absolutely no intention of revealing freely. She paused at the edge of his camp, one hand resting on what appeared to be a medicine pouch at her waist, the other hovering near something hidden beneath her wet clothing, likely a blade. Dixon's hand moved instinctively toward his revolver, but when their eyes met across that crackling fire, he froze. There was no fear in her gaze, no desperation, only a quiet, calculating challenge. "Can I warm myself by your fire?" she asked, her voice low and steady, with an edge that made his pulse quicken for reasons he couldn't quite name. It wasn't really a request, it was a test. Dixon had encountered desperate travelers throughout his years on the frontier, but this woman didn't look desperate at all. She looked dangerous, controlled, purposeful, like a coiled rattlesnake deciding whether to strike. Still, he stepped aside with a cautious nod, instinctively aware that refusing her might bring worse trouble than allowing her near. She moved past him into the firelight, and the air seemed to compress, the crackling flame suddenly deafening in the tense silence. She knelt without asking permission, extending her slender hands toward the heat, and said absolutely nothing for what felt like an eternity. Dixon watched her from a careful distance, his Winchester propped within easy reach, every lawman's instinct he possessed firing warning signals. Wait, because what she said next would flip his entire world upside down. Finally, she spoke her name, Takoda. Her voice was soft as smoke, but carried the weight of battles fought and survived. Dixon offered her dried venison from his pack, which she accepted silently, chewing with deliberate calm, while her eyes never stopped studying him, cataloging his weapons, his movements, his vulnerabilities. The tension between them hummed like a telegraph wire stretched too tight. When she finally broke the heavy silence, her words came fast and precise as thrown knives. White desperados had raided her people's sacred cave 3 nights ago, stealing ancient ceremonial masks that held not just spiritual power, but literal gold and turquoise, worth a fortune. They'd left 2 elders dead, and the rest of her band scattered in fear. She'd been tracking these thieves alone for days, but they numbered at least 8 armed men, too many for one person to face. She needed a horse, ammunition, and perhaps, though she'd never admit it aloud, someone who understood how white outlaws thought and moved. Dixon questioned her story carefully, probing for inconsistencies, but she met every doubt with sharp details, names, descriptions, the specific location where they'd camped yesterday, the kind of precision that doesn't come from lies. She was fierce and calculating, her rage burning cold and controlled beneath that wet buckskin dress. Outside, the canyon wind moaned through the rocks like ancestral spirits mourning, and Dixon realized too late that Takoda had shifted subtly closer to where his rifle leaned. A faint, dangerous smile touched her lips as she rose fluidly to her feet, her shadow stretching tall and menacing against the canvas of his tent. "But you won't believe what her real plan was all along." She wasn't here just to share warmth and tell sad stories. She had already decided he was going to be part of her revenge, whether he agreed or not. She moved to the tent entrance, her head tilting slightly as if hearing something only her Apache-trained ears could detect. Then Dixon heard it too, the soft crunch of boots on gravel, faint but deliberate, multiple sets approaching from different angles. His stomach dropped like a stone down a well. Takoda's hand flew to the hidden blade at her waist, her entire demeanor transforming from desperate refugee to warrior in a heartbeat. Her voice came barely above a whisper, but sharp as broken glass. "They found us." The outlaws hadn't expected resistance this deep in the canyon, and neither had Dixon expected his night to explode into violence. But years of martial instinct took over instantly. He grabbed his Winchester, following Takoda as she melted into the darkness outside. The desert transformed instantly from peaceful to predatory. Torches bobbed in the distance like angry spirits, weaving through the rock formations toward his camp. Dixon felt the crushing weight of being badly outnumbered, but the gleam in Takoda's eyes wasn't fear. It was pure, focused defiance. She signaled for absolute silence with hand gestures, her movements fluid and commanding as any cavalry officer he'd ever served under. Together they crept along the canyon walls, the frigid air burning their lungs, the night so still it seemed the entire desert was holding its breath to see what happened next. Dixon realized with crystal clarity that whatever investigation had led him to this canyon, chasing train robbers, seeking frontier justice, had now tangled him in something far bigger and more dangerous than himself. Standing beside this fierce warrior woman who deceived him from the first word, he wasn't sure anymore whether he was the hunter or the hunted. The ancient canyon wall seemed to watch as this unlikely pair prepared to face a danger that would test every ounce of their courage and cunning. And Dixon knew with absolute certainty that his life had already changed forever. Here's where the night turned into pure chaos. The canyon exploded with gunfire, a single rifle shot cracking off the red rock walls like thunder from an angry god. Dixon threw himself behind a boulder, sharp stones tearing his palms, while Takoda vanished into the shadows like smoke and wind. The outlaws' torches jerked wildly, their cocky laughter transforming into startled curses as they spread out to surround what remained of the camp. Dixon's heart hammered against his ribs as he raised his Winchester, drew in a breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. One torch went dark immediately, the man holding it dropping silently into the sand. In the chaos that followed, Takoda struck like a desert cat, her blade flashing silver starlight as she took down another man without making a sound. Pure chaos erupted. The gang fired wildly in all directions, their bullets sparking off ancient rock. Dixon scrambled up a steep incline for higher ground, his boots sliding on loose scree. But the elevated position gave him the tactical advantage he desperately needed. He picked off another outlaw, his shot splitting the night wide open, and spotted Takoda weaving between massive boulders like a phantom warrior from legends. She signaled with a sharp hand gesture. She'd located their leader, the scarred man barking orders near the horses, his gravelly voice cutting through the pandemonium. His presence was clearly the backbone holding this ragged gang together. Dixon understood instantly. Eliminate him, and the others would scatter like tumbleweeds. He crept closer through the shadows, keeping low while Takoda circled wide from the opposite direction. The desert seemed to hold its breath once more, every tiny sound amplified impossibly, The creak of saddle leather, the rustle of sagebrush, the distant howl of a hunting coyote. Then they struck as one. Takoda launched from the darkness, knocking the scarred leader clean off his saddle with the force of a small avalanche. Dixon's rifle roared a warning shot into the star-filled sky, and absolute panic tore through the remaining gang members. Most fled immediately, their torches bobbing away into the night like retreating fireflies, abandoning their leader to his fate. But the scarred man fought like a cornered mountain lion, vicious and desperate. He swung a hunting knife that caught Takoda's forearm, opening a thin crimson line across her skin. She gritted her teeth, her eyes blazing with white-hot fury, and twisted with devastating precision, forcing him onto his back in the dirt. Her blade came to rest against the earth beside his throat, a hair's breadth from ending his life. But you won't believe what happened when they recovered the stolen treasure. Dixon disarmed the man quickly, both of them breathing hard in the cold night air. With the fight finally over, they bound the outlaw with rope and retrieved the stolen ceremonial masks, intricately carved pieces that seemed to shimmer with inner light in the torch glow, as though they held heartbeats of their own. Dixon felt something fundamental shift in his chest as he watched Takoda cradle them with profound reverence, her warrior hardness softening for just a moment into something achingly human. They saddled the horses and rode toward her people's camp, the eastern horizon just beginning to pale with the promise of dawn. The desert, which had felt so hostile just hours before, now seemed vast and almost protective, as if honoring what they'd accomplished together. When they arrived at the hidden camp, the elders of Takoda's band gathered with faces lined by sorrow and cautious hope. Tears gleamed in weathered eyes as she presented the recovered masks, and quiet prayers rose like smoke toward the lightening sky. Dixon stood at a respectful distance, removing his hat, feeling an unexpected lump form in his throat as he witnessed their profound relief. Takoda turned to him then, her obsidian eyes no longer sharp with suspicion and calculation, but glowing with genuine gratitude. No words passed between them, but she gave him a single nod, one warrior acknowledging another's honor. Dixon, who had spent 10 hard years drifting without real purpose beyond the next warrant and the next town, felt the unfamiliar warmth of truly belonging to something meaningful. He swung into his saddle, thinking he should ride on before he became part of something he didn't deserve, before these people discovered he was just a broken lawman running from his own demons. But her voice stopped him cold. "Ride with us a while longer," Takoda said, her tone somehow both gentle and commanding. "A warrior who fights beside us belongs with us." The words tugged at something buried deep in his chest, something he'd thought frontier violence had killed years ago. For a long moment Dixon hesitated, old habits screaming at him to ride away alone as always. Then he grinned beneath his mustache and tipped his hat. "Reckon I could do that?" he replied quietly. Together they turned their horses toward the rising sun, the scars of the night's battle already fading into the kind of memory that becomes legend. As the first golden rays of daylight spilled across the New Mexico badlands, Dixon knew the Wild West would never run short of stories. Stories of danger and redemption, of unlikely alliances forged in gunfire and blood. And for the first time in a decade, he was ready to be part of something bigger than himself. If this tale of deception, courage, and redemption has gripped you, if you felt the crack of gunfire echoing off those canyon walls and the weight of choosing honor over safety, then stay with us. The frontier holds countless more stories of unlikely heroes and the battles that defined them. Subscribe and ride with us deeper into the untamed heart of the Wild West.